I'm David Bank, and from Impact Alpha, this is an Agents of Impact podcast.
Part of what we did in this book was not just surface the data that says this is the missed opportunity. We also looked at why it is that you get this better risk mitigation and stronger financial performance when women are involved in decision-making rooms.
That's Patience Marime-Ball, founder and CEO of Women of the World Endowment, a global endowment focused on gender lens investing. Her book, The XX Edge, Unlocking Higher Returns and Lower Risk, is being released this week. She spoke with Impact Alpha's contributing editor, Monique Aiken. Let's jump right into their conversation.
So it's a bit surreal to imagine the crystal ball you had to have written the XX Edge well before many of the unimaginable things happening in the world right now with respect to women, here in the US and around the world. So what's your take on what's happening now, and how does the XX Edge point to a path to addressing it all?
Monique, it's wonderful to be in conversation with you again. You're one of my favorite people to be talking to. And, thank you very much for setting up, our first question that way, because it's important for us to sit in and acknowledge the great disruption and dislocation that is happening around us. Our news is dominated by wake-up calls around climate, around food security, inflation, conflict in regions in Europe, but all over the world, really. There is data that was quoted recently by someone we had in conversation that said, if we continue on the same track, 50% of the world's population will be living in conflict zones by 2030 or something like that, and 80% by 2035 if we continue along the same lines. We have health challenges. We have violence, against, individuals. We have, mass shootings in this country. The Supreme Court is doing its part in gutting the rights for women to just simply make decisions over, their sacred bodies. And so much is coming at us. We wrote this book partly because we wrote in 2021, and that was a period of incredible disruption, as you know. I mean, climate and the healthcare pandemic, and Mr. Floyd's passing as well. So there was a lot going on. It was pre the Russian invasion of Ukraine and so on, but there certainly was enough going on. And part of why we wrote this book was really to demonstrate with extensive data and case stories that the world can deal with these accelerating challenges in a new way, a new paradigm of investing and allowing or enabling leadership by more women in places of decision making across, capital markets, across, all of the key challenges that we all face today. In innovation, in inclusive and environmental and social strategies, and ultimately the fact that you can actually realize not just better risk mitigation across all of these challenges, but outperformance. And for individual investors, better returns on their portfolios, and for economies, better economic growth. We almost called the XX Edge the book. We almost called it more pie because, more GDP pie, because we know that when women are involved in decision making, there's generally better health, there's generally better wealth. And we even have data that says that, this is from a McKinsey study done, I think, in 2014, where they did a calculation that between the years 2015 and 2025, if 95 countries within their study would just try to reach gender equity in their economies, would generate $28 trillion of additional GDP, global GDP. And that's a missed opportunity, right? Even conservative numbers that they calculated indicated that even if they didn't reach gender equity, if those 95 countries each got as good as the next country above would add $12 trillion to global GDP. And so we have an opportunity that we are choosing, and this is the difficult thing, we're choosing not to take advantage of.
I always say that we can have more of the same if we, the royal we, do nothing differently from what we've done in the past, or we can take what's behind door number 2. It's literally that simple. We can make another choice, a choice to center women, center Indigenous thinking, center people of color as deciders, as agents of change, as fully human participants in global and financial systems. Your book has some jarring stats about the current state of affairs of the financial markets. And we know that the numbers don't reflect what would be a normal populated weighted distribution in those numbers. Since talent is evenly distributed, something is up, right? And in the book, you suggest that we would all benefit from women being in seats of decision, power, and influence in all areas of the economy. You already mentioned some stats about GDP growth and possibility. Then there's also government, health sector, education, but also, and in particular, the financial system. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. What you described, and you named all the different forms of diversity that the world has at its disposal to leverage for more inclusive growth, for more pie, as we name in the book, whether it's women, cis women, and anyone who identifies as a woman, whether it's indigenous populations, whether it's a majority of the world's population that lives in the global south, you name it, right? That there is an opportunity for the full potential paradigm. But what we have today, and it's sad to say, is that at any given time the numbers are different, but right now $110 trillion of assets under management globally. Well, 97.8% of that is allocated and managed by men, and largely white men. And of the Fortune 500 companies, these are companies that are informing all kinds of decisions about how the world deals with climate challenges, social justice challenges, you name the challenges. Only 41 of them are led by women. In private equity, we only have 14% of women fund managers. And the data is out there, as you know, less than 3% of venture capital is directed towards enterprises founded or run by women. So the data is jarring. The opportunity on the other end is actually quite impressive and leads to the question that why aren't we taking advantage of this opportunity that lies in front of us? As you said, talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not. So we know that gender inclusive teams are 21% more likely to generate outperformance in profitability relative to non-diverse teams. We also know that new companies that are founded with at least one founding member who's female will perform 63% better than those that are all male teams. And this was a data set that was generated over and observed over a 10-year period. When it comes to financial entities that care about their bottom lines, we know that women, when extended access to credit, are better repairs. Those portfolios have lower NPLs. And this is data that we also know. And then if you go all the way to high finance, the world of hedge funds, we know that even in those spaces where women are not really well represented, where you have women run hedge funds, they have outperformed the average of larger hedge funds by a margin of 6% over a 6-year period. That's 6%. That's a lot of missed opportunity when women are not involved in decision-making rooms. But part of what we did in this book was not just surface the data that says this is the missed opportunity. We also looked at why it is that you get this better risk mitigation and stronger financial performance when women are involved in decision-making rooms. And we isolated 3 traits. that when we start talking about them, people sort of nod their heads because it is relatively clear to people. So nothing is absolute. This is obviously on a bell curve, but based on that, we did some research that indicated that women tend to have these traits. They tend to have low ego, and so their leadership styles are more collaborative and more diffused. And as the world enable diffused leadership, and as the world moves to decentralization of operations, and at this point post the pandemic, folks, virtual workspaces, diffused leadership styles are critical. And as challenges accelerate and accelerate across the globe, you need leadership that knows how to collaborate across geographies and across innovations. And women, that low ego tends to allow for that. The second thing is women tend to be more risk aware. It's traditionally been called risk averse. Our view is they're risk aware, and risk awareness leads to better due diligence, prioritization of investments, of allocating investments differently, building differentiated portfolios, looking for those opportunities that are not in the mainstream. And that also can generate upside. Similarly, the third trait that we looked at was that we noticed in our research was women take the long view. They tend to prioritize the long view over short-term gains. And that too can have real impact. But coming back to your identification of the diverse communities that are not included, and why it matters. So context, women tend to be closer to the challenges. Traditionally, we say that women are, when challenges happen, women are the victims, are the majority of the victims. We think that actually the world needs to look at that as they're proximate to the challenges, thereby they're best positioned to actually be key drivers of solutions and innovations and strategies to addressing those challenges. And finally, well, that data point that I just indicated, we have 500 Fortune 500 companies, and only 41 of them are led by women. So there's underutilization of female talent. So that's part of the context. And even though this book focuses on cis women, it's partly because that's the space where we had the most data. What we say in this book, most of the strategies that we talk about and the outcomes that we describe are actually outcomes that would come about with greater diversity, whether it's racial diversity, geographic diversity, etc. There is just more opportunity in embracing diversity in decision-making rooms.
It's so important, all these points that you just made. And essentially, what we're talking through is how do we visibilize for decision makers who are currently in the seats of power? This opposite side of a challenge in the current state of affairs is the opportunity. And it's kind of odd to me that it's 2022 and we're still talking about the need for and the benefits of creating gender inclusive spaces and securing rights that our foremothers marched for decades ago. Women are half the sky. Yet we struggle under the weight of these multiple oppressions, the violence that you just named. Women of color, essentially more so, Black women, more so, Indigenous women, historically, particularly in the United States, but around the world, trans women, disabled women, neurodiverse women, migrant women, certainly still remain in very vulnerable positions. These systemic and structural barriers to their full economic and democratic participation persist. So we need a path to getting this right. Do you see a path to getting this right? What are the risks of inaction to those who are trying to visibilize all of these things too, and if they remain incapable of seeing?
Well, the risk of inaction is the fact that as these crises accelerate, we are not taking advantage of the entire toolbox that humanity has to beat back these challenges, right? We have the opportunity to face the next challenge, not with massive fiscal packages, stimulus packages like we just went through, we have the opportunity to face some of these challenges with innovations in healthcare. If Dr. Kariko had received funding when she wanted funding over the 20 years while she was developing mRNA, we might have had the vaccine ready in 2020 when we started experiencing COVID-19. Would not have had 2 years of trying to figure out how to deal with it. Would have moved fairly quickly to the stage where we are now, where it is going to likely stay with us, but the period of not just financial loss, but emotional loss, the loss of lives would not have been as extreme. And it's just as simple as being more inclusive in your teams. It literally is that simple. And what is astonishing about the fact that we're not wanting, even post this crisis, that we might actually not have the same level of urgency to the idea of inclusion. So we in this book, in the XX Edge, we articulate towards the end of the book, we have these what if scenarios where we state where we are today, whether it's in the care economy, the healthcare sector with the reproductive rights, climate change. We say, this is where we are. But what if? What if we had these moonshot level ambitions? What would that look like? And then in the last part of the book, we then provide specific steps that entities and individuals, investors can take. And so, to your point, let's take financial markets specifically. How do you create more space for decision making? How do you have more women in decision making, in real decision making seats where they're allocating capital? Because you will end up with differentiated portfolios that are delivering higher returns and likely stronger positive impact. Well, intentionally hire more women, intentionally mentor and sponsor them so that they are going, and intentionally promote them so that they are being promoted into those seats of real decision making. All of it requires intentionality and commitment to doing things differently. And in some organizations, that is setting up mentorship programs, allyship programs, sponsorship programs, making it possible in a non-threatening way. And this is really important. As I said, we almost named this book More Pie, because this is not a remove and replace strategy. It is, let's have more seats. And those seats, when women take those seats, will actually create the opportunity for even bigger outcomes for all of us. And so it's not a remove and replace strategy. It is an inclusive strategy. And so there's nothing threatening about what we're proposing in this book. And it is, it's sad when, in our politics, we have the idea of replacement, because, that assumes that the pie is fixed. And it is not. The pie is not fixed. We can employ a full potential paradigm, grow the pie, and all of humanity can be healthier and wealthier.
That resonates so deeply with me, because I think, we have a window to get this right. Certainly there's tipping points looming on the climate side and others that, once passed, we can't come back, but we have a shot. To your point about moonshots, like we can take them now. And so given that, what's ahead for the Women of the World Endowment and you, Ruth, in the days and weeks to come? And what are some of the moonshots that you all are going to take?
So for Women of the World Endowment, we are growing. The team is growing. The investments we're making are incredible investments. And maybe the next time we talk, we can actually go through some of those investments that we're making, including in healthcare, in climate, backing and fueling women change makers every single day. We wake up every single day with that mission. It is not a 95 and 5% mission for the endowment. It is 100% alignment of that mission. We are, building our presence ex-US through our grant investing, but also our for-profit investing, building strategic capital that we're now beginning to think about an advisory sleeve to Women of the World Endowment. We've been doing this with different organizations on Wall Street and beyond, and now we're going to formalize that. And as far as the book is concerned, someone asked Ruth and I whether we wanted for this book to be a New York Times bestseller. That would be nice. But more importantly, our joint objective is to have this book actually inform systems change, where we will have gender diversity leading to differentiated outcomes, more inclusive outcomes, more money for everyone, and a growth in the pie. So we actually are in the process of designing a campaign around the book. And, the campaign is to really take this message into decision-making rooms today. And we're hoping that at the end of the day, the XX Edge will have a seat in every decision-making room, right? The XX Edge, the ability for women to inform decisions and give us all, the world that we all want to see, that there will be a seat in every innovation lab and, standing room in innovation labs, and a seat in every decision-making room for the XX Edge.
That's going to do it for this Agents of Impact podcast. You can read more about Patience, Women of the World Endowment, and many other Agents of Impact at impactalpha.com. Thanks to Monique and to Patience, and to our producer, Isaac Silk, and the whole team at Impact Alpha, Investment News for a Sustainable Edge.